Bring that ass back like a boom, 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 boom.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and you're very welcome to this week's edition of DriveThru Sports Weekly. We have a fairly well-packed agenda for you today. I'm glad to say, now I know that might seem a little bit strange when one considers that it means I will probably be prattling on for a fair while, which presents its own challenges for me in a way. But I want to keep the show up to being of a fairly decent quality, and I must say I was very pleasantly surprised with the reaction and uptake of our first edition last week. So, having made a good start, I can only assume, without wanting to sound cocky or arrogant or most importantly complacent about things, I can only assume that people considered it to be of a reasonable enough quality. So I would hope to, at the very least, match that again, or if at all possible, to better it. Now, first of all, this week we can only start in one spot, and that is Gala Games. I must offer my heartiest congratulations to the Dunboyne senior ladies football team, who, for the first time in their history since they were founded in their current incarnation in 1996, captured the Maid Senior Championship by defeating Simonstown in the final last Saturday at Trim by 15 points to 10. Now, obviously due to ongoing chaos in the world, and with crowds being limited that can go here or go there or whatever, I was unable to attend the match myself, and I may as well be honest, the quality of the online stream didn't exactly make it any easier to take in what was going on. Having said that, that is by no means a dig at those who put the live stream on. It is a novel idea. It has certainly been a massive boon and source of comfort to myself over the last 6 or 8 months, 6 months since this COVID malarkey kicked off, to be able to keep up to some degree at least with what's been going on in the sporting world. It was, of course, very much a game of two halves, because while it was in fact the weather that played havoc to some degree with the streaming of the game, the same aforementioned conditions also as should I say, the weather played havoc with the streaming of the game, and indeed with the game itself, because Simonstown were very much quicker out of the blocks, having built up a lead of 6 points to 1 early on, and by half time that had moved on to 10 points to 6, with the accuracy of the irrepressible Emma Duggan being the number one piece of artillery in Dunboyne's response. But following the change of ends in St. Loman's Park, things were absolutely turned on their head, as our ladies in their traditional blue and red strip with the black and amber crest took over in the second half, outscoring Simonstown by 9 points to no score, to record, as I said, their first ever victory in the Meath Senior Championship final. So they have actually, and I'm only after thinking of this now while I started talking, they have actually maintained the club's 100. No, they haven't actually, but I was about to say they had maintained the club's 100% record in senior football championship finals, having won on Saturday, and with the lads having won the 3 that the club has contested in that sphere. But of course that would be erroneous of me to state that, because of course Simonstown did beat our girls in the final in Ashbourne last year. Now, it was a game we could have won and probably should have won, but so as to turn what would have been a misnomer on my behalf around a little bit and take myself out of a hole here, what I can say is how much that the girls have improved over the course of that year is very evident by the way which, in all fairness, they obliterated the vast majority of the oppositions they came across en route to taking the title. Look, no county championship is easy won at any level, whether it be the Dublin men's senior football, which surely must rank as the most competitive in the country, or a junior D championship somewhere down the country, with 2 clubs that it may actually be the unit's only team, but no county title at any level is easy won. Every one of them means the exact same amount to those that are involved in it, and winning or losing, the extreme of emotions is exactly the same no matter where it is or what the level is. But on Saturday evening, and now before I go any further, I have to admit, and not for the first time, that I absolutely hate mentioning names in situations like this, but I hope people will forgive me in this instance for just giving a special mention and especially commending the efforts of people like Deirdre Blaney and Julie Kavanagh and Aoife Thompson and Claire Barker and Sinead Hackett, and I probably have left somebody out as well, and if I have, of course the captain herself, how could I forget Fiona O'Neill. These girls have been soldiering with the club at the top level from the time they would have started playing adult football, when the club's top team, if you want to call it that, was back up at senior previously, and of course in more recent years they have basically risen through the ranks again to find themselves sort of back where they are, well, above where they are now. Not only are they at the top table, but they're in the box seat, having, as I say, came from junior to intermediate up to senior, and now completed the triumvirate of county titles. And you know, each and every one on the panel, whether they be, I better not mention age here, but whether they be newcomers to the top level of football or ladies that have soldiered there for a long time, you know, the commitment is the same, and all of that. But I mentioned in particular, like, some of the girls like Deirdre Blaney, as I say, and Julie Kavanagh, who would have you know, been away on several occasions for the summers while the club were still toiling to try and get to where they wanted to go in the senior championship. Well, to get into it first, but to try and reach the summit of the mountain, which they of course did last Saturday eventually. But even when the likes of those girls and indeed some of the others were away for summers and that, or on J1s as they call them, or wherever they happened to be, they always found time to train and put in the hard yards, as it was. And hold on a sec. So yes, it was indeed great to see them, shall we say, more experienced players eventually get their just rewards after years of toiling to try and get to that stage. Now, if there was one, and again, this may be just me being sentimental, and if it is, I apologise, because I do not in any way, shape or form seek or mean to detract from what was an amazing achievement by the girls, especially having come so close and suffered the heartbreak of losing the final last year, though they did after the championship final later on actually defeat Simonstown in the league final, which I think may actually have been played early this year before all the corona business took hold. But as I say, and again, this may only be me, and it is not meant in any way, shape, or form to detract from an outstanding achievement by the girls. But if there was one little bit of disappointment, I suppose, is that the their winning of the county championship will not perhaps bring them the reward it may have done in previous seasons, simply as due to ongoing constraints imposed on things by the COVID situation. I am not actually sure whether whether there's a provincial club championship for the girls. I don't think there is, because I don't think there is one from the lads end of the bargain either. Now, whether that is required or not, I would certainly feel that considering that when it comes to the All Ireland Championship, which I still don't think will go ahead, and I honestly hope it doesn't, but if you consider that they were talking about going without counties who were in trouble as regards COVID in the main All Ireland Football Championship, I honestly do not see how similar status couldn't have been taken regarding the provincial club championships, but as it stands, it's more than likely that this year at least the girls won't probably get the chance to go on and test their talents at the next level of club competition. Now, that leads me on, I suppose, to my final point about Saturday's great win, as to whether many of the more senior and more decorated members of the platoon will have the hunger or the desire to go again, as it were, and try and hold on to the crown now, having got their hands on it. Now, at this point, I must say that nobody could blame them if they did want to bow out while on top. I suppose that's what everybody tries to do, no matter what line of business you're in or what sport you're in, for that matter. We'll actually see a bit more of that later on in the show, but I know yesterday or the day before, I know Aoife Thompson moved to London to continue her studies, and we obviously wish her all the best with that, but I would be hoping that, please God, if the decorated troops do go again once more anyway, that Aoife will be back with them come next summer, because even though there are some of those players with serious mileage up, if you want to put it that way, not only do I think there's more potential in them, but I think with them still infused into the system, that there's certainly more in front of that team than there is behind it in terms of what they can do. But look, for now, I suppose with the year that's in it, it's just absolutely brilliant to be talking in terms of having a county championship in the bag and to celebrate, and as I say, it will be an absolutely commendable achievement at any time, but with the current prevailing circumstances in the world, it actually feels even more so now. I suppose the other thing somebody said to me over the weekend was, where does that leave us now as regards the presentation of medals and all that, which is a good point. I would have thought it highly unlikely that the club will be able to hold what they call their Gala Ball at the end of every season, where the medals and trophies and that are dispensed. But look, that's a story for another day. For now, all we need to do is revel in the fact that the girls have their first senior county title. It's no more than they deserve, and I know I'm not alone when I say that the lift they have given the parish with their sporting deeds is absolutely incalculable, and I genuinely believe that there's definitely more there for them if they have the hunger and desire to go after it again. Moving on slightly, looking at a quick scan of Gaelic games in other parts of the country over the weekend, there's absolutely no doubting the big story, unfortunately, in a GA sense, has to be the well publicised Pidge Invasion at the end of the Tyrone County final, when the Dungannon Clark's club won their first county title in what I think was around 50 years. Now I could be wrong, and if I am, and if somebody wants to correct me in the comments under this video, by all means do. Look, when a team has gone as long without winning something, or in some cases winning anything, as the Tyrone club appeared to do in this case, it was only natural that emotions were going to run high and, spill over, let's call it this way. As to what you can do, I don't know. You're looking at it and you're saying, you can't, in one way, blame the winning supporters for being absolutely overwhelmed with jubilation. Yes, they should have what would you say, what's the word I'm looking for? Exercised a little bit more restrained and a little bit more honest to God cop on in how they greeted their victory, but as Jack Bootman, God be good to him, famously said after a little bit of a dust up with Meath and Mayo in the 1986 All-Ireland final, I'm not going to condemn, but certainly I'm not going to condone, but certainly I'm not going to condemn anyone either, but because I can tell you one thing, that if I was in that position and we hadn't won a county title in God knows how many years, hell or high water wouldn't keep me from getting out to celebrate with the lads. Now, look, in the current situation, it shouldn't have happened. Everyone knows it shouldn't have happened, but I mean, what do the GAA do? I mean, do we seriously want to put club competitions in a similar position to the inter-county ones, whereby supporters aren't allowed out on the pitch at all after games? Now, I think that would be a very authoritarian and, in fact, retrograde step that could absolutely backfire in the long term on the GAA. But look, we know it didn't look good in the current climate with current situations ongoing. But it's just what irked me was when you hear the like of Arlene Foster spouting off about it, and the PSNI saying they're going to launch an investigation into this or into that. You know, it's, if you go down that road, keep spectators off the pitch altogether is the only fair solution. Now, do I agree with it? No. I can see why it would be necessary, because it's very much a case of a few bad apples rotting the barrel, whereby people are not social distancing and you know, at least making an effort to try and keep within the protocols. Now, that would be very easy to enforce in a county ground, say like Healy Park in Omagh, or if it were Park Tolton or Parnell Park or any of the county grounds in the country. But like, how does one potentially go about policing the like of that in club grounds and at all grades of sport around the country again? And that, now I go back to, I think I may have mentioned this last week, but I go back to the scenario whereby parents, for example, can't go and watch their kids playing juvenile sport, and whatever sport it may be, and yet you can go into a pub and order a grub and have your couple of pints or whatever it may be. The airport and seaports are still open, which they shouldn't be, and which should never have been left open when this thing reared its ugly head in the first place. But to slightly move on from the whole corona side of things before I give my poor unfortunate head a headache. The other thing that you would say was that the GA have bigger, well, maybe I think bigger, but there are a flock of people who, of course, won't say it's bigger, but I think the GA have bigger problems on their hands to try and solve vis-a-vis competition structure and game structure. Now, what I mean by game structure is this, and at this point it must be pointed out that yes, I know competition structure within a county is a matter for that particular county committee to resolve, but as exciting and as good as it may seem from a fantasy point of view, I think the prospect of winning or losing a county final on a penalty shootout is absolutely ridiculous. And now there are a lot of rules which the GA have adopted over the years, which I think have been taken from other sports and work very well. I think, for example, the American Australian rules, the yellow card and red card. I think the sin bin is a good idea. I think the countdown clock is a good idea. I think there's a few sports when you think that basketball is a five-a-side indoor sport, and Australian rules and things like that have two referees. I think that should definitely be brought in and should have been brought in a long time ago. I think a video referee, or whatever you want to call it, whether you want to call it VAR or allowing managers challenge one or two calls per game or whatever, or a television match official or whatever you want to call it. I think that should also definitely be, at least the possibility of implementing it should at least be explored, and should in fact have been done long before now. But one thing that the GA have brought in from other sports, or to be more specific from soccer, that while from an excitement and an entertainment point of view, I'm sure it makes total sense and adds value to things, but I think the idea of winning, and in particular losing, a county final on a penalty shootout in our sport is plainly ridiculous. There has to be a better way. There has to be another way. If we were absolutely desperate to get things finished in a hurry, I think it was in the O'Byrne Cup and the other subsidiary competitions a couple of years back that they actually tried 45-meter kicks by way of sorting out games in the subsidiary competitions that finished level, and number one, it would present a completely different sort of challenge to players as to who their five chosen 45-meter or 50-yard kickers would be. And secondly, and again, let me again state that I've absolutely no problem with the GA borrowing most of what they have from other sports, but I do think the penalty shootout was a step too far and a step in the wrong direction. I think, and again, if anyone can correct me on this, if I'm wrong, please put it down in the comments, but I think it was the Donegal football final that was decided on a penalty shootout over the weekend, and to me that's just plainly ridiculous. But look, we might say there might be some change in it now, because between now and I'm going on the way it used to be within the GAA cycle, that between now and the end of January, say, of next year, whatever bit of tinkering is going to be done with the rule book sort of kicks off from now. And if they were to get rid of the penalty shootout out of the GAA equation and come up with a 50 kicking contest or something of a more GAA relatable method, I for one wouldn't object, and I'd say there's plenty in who would be likewise in similar positions. Moving on then next to news of horse racing, and sadly and regrettably, I'm sure most of you would know by now, or certainly anybody that's au fait with horse racing would know that there's only one place we can start here, and that is with the terribly sad and totally untimely passing of Pat Mullen since the time we published published, you hear me? I had my last episode of the DriveThru Sports Weekly from Pancreatic Cancer. Now, from what I know, pancreatic cancer is one of the more aggressive strains of the disease, and certainly one of the hardest to get a handle on or get it treated on, because I do know that it took a very well known man who I was very proud to have met on a few different occasions the late great Brian Lenihan Jr. And even though Pat Mullen seemed to have rallied a bit from the time he was struck down with it first, because I remember him being on the Late Late Show with Ryan Tubridy, what I think could have been around this time last year, or maybe it was longer, I'm not entirely sure, but I know at that stage Pat was in wonderful form and was very resilient, and looking forward to what was ahead at that stage. And I know Dermot Weld had, to some degree anyway, kept him involved with the training of the horses in Rosewell House, and that besides that, Pat had really thrown himself into fundraising for the Irish Cancer Society, and including organising a charity race which was actually run over Champions Weekend last year, in which Pat was actually going to ride himself until tragically he became ill again shortly before the meeting was to take place, and he was precluded from taking part in it. But I do know it raised an absolute sight of money for the Irish Cancer Society, and that was only one of a number of selfless things that Pat did in the course of trying to battle his cancer. But it was probably somewhat fitting then that his former boss, DK Weld, had a fairly memorable couple of days at the big racing weekend. Can't remember, was it last week or a couple of weeks ago now? I think it was a couple of weeks ago at this stage. The time was going that quick. Now you wouldn't be able to keep track of it, but Search for a Song, owned by Moiglair, stood out the road from me, was his big winner over the 2-day meeting between Leopardstown and the Curragh, and that in itself I think was fitting, for the simple reason that an awful lot of Pat's big winners would have come in the red and white silks with the red cap of the Moiglair team over the years, and if I'm not mistaken, and I could be, but I'm nearly sure that the Moiglair silks were actually draped over the coffin at his funeral last weekend. I could be wrong about that, but I'm nearly sure it was them. There was a couple of sets of colours draped over it anyway, but it was certainly a poignant winner for Dermot, I'm sure, and not only for Dermot but anyone that follows racing couldn't but understand the significance of it. Elsewhere in racing during the week, At Listowel, actually, it emerged that Mark O'Hare had hung up his riding boots. Mark O'Hare would be a very well-known face, I would say, on the point-to-point scene, and perhaps particularly up in the northern part of the country, but since Nina Carberry retired some years ago, he had become mostly synonymous with being Noel Meade's go-to bumper jockey, and the pair had struck up a very fruitful partnership in the last few years that had brought them a lot of big winners and played a big part in catapulting Noel back at least towards the higher echelons of the jump racing game, where he of course deserves to be, and they racked up a good few big enough winners and had bumper horses run well that didn't win in that, but actually, before I go another yard further, I must correct myself. I made a very basic error, and one which I shouldn't have, especially somebody like me that's in and around the racing scene as long as I am, and I apologise unreservedly. Now, some might only see it as a small thing, but it's the type of thing that would bug me until the back of beyond if I didn't correct myself. The Mile Airstrode colours are, of course, black and white with a red cap and black star on the top of it, not red and white, as I stated a couple of minutes ago. But my apologies for that. But anyway, getting back to the Noel Meade situation and the bumper jockey arrangements, if you want to call them that, I did notice there's a qualified riders race on today's card in Listowel, and it was none other than Finny McGuire, who he had enlisted to ride Powerful Ted in the said contest. Now, I noticed, I only looked there about 10 minutes ago, and I noticed the horse is not running, which is sort of disappointing, because from a personal point of view, the idea of Finny riding for Noel would be really the dream team, just as much as himself and Nina were when they were, if not, well, they did have a spell of dominance for a while, but even when the Willie Mullins juggernaut got going and completely took over the bumper scene for a long time, Noel and Nina were still probably the most potent threat to them for a period anyway, until Gordon Elliott got his massive battalions going again. But the idea of Finny riding for Noel would be, if there's ever a bit of romance left in sport, to me that would be the epitome of it, because Finney's father, Adrian, who is of course from Kilmessan, although domiciled down in Cork for many years now. Adrian McGuire was my favourite jockey for as long as he was riding, particularly over Welsh. He spent most of his time in England, even though I know he had won the Irish Grand National on Omerta for Martin Pipe in 1991 before going to England to ride for David the Duke Nicholson, with whom he had a marvellous career, but at the same time some horrendously bad luck as well. I recall Barton Bank coming down at the last in the King George one year when he absolutely had the race won. I know Adrian had absolutely diabolical luck with injuries, and I remember his late mother Phyllis passed away a day or two prior to Cheltenham one year as well, so he did remarkably well to have as wonderful a career as he did, when one considers all the injury setbacks he was beset by over the years. But it probably would be fair enough to, well, there's no doubt actually now that I think of it, while the Irish Grand National win for Martin Pipe may have been to a certain extent the victory which had, I don't know, would you say, launched them or really catapulted them into the big time. From my own personal point of view, anyway, his victory on cool ground in the Cheltenham Gold Cup in what I think was 1992 was the first time I ever really took notice of him, and from that he became something of a favourite to me. Feelings that were only absolutely cemented by two things in particular. Firstly, what I still regard as the joint holder of the title of the best ride I've ever seen any jockey given a horse, when he somehow, and I mean somehow, managed to get Viking Flagship up to win the Queen Mother Champion Chase, beating Deep Sensation and a horse of Nicky Henderson's, which I just cannot think of the name of at the moment. And you may remember the race, his actual racing cap in the colours of Viking Flagship's owner, the late Graham Roach, actually flew off during the race, and he finished the race wearing just his riding helmet and the colours, and somehow got the horse up to win. Now, not for a moment am I suggesting that uh, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is capable of or likely to achieve anything anywhere near what um, Ferguson did during his time at the club. My mere reason for being inclined to give him another chance, I suppose you would say. Um, not for a moment am I suggesting that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is capable of or likely to repeat anything along the lines of what Ferguson achieved during his time at the club. My only reason for being inclined to give him more time would be to stick with the line of thought that there's very little to be achieved by removing him from his position because, as I said earlier, they've already tricked around with and changed managers several times since Ferguson retired 7 years ago, and it certainly hasn't stood them in great stead in the interim. Uh, Having said that, to fail to acknowledge that there have been inefficiencies in the United system, both on and off the field for far too long now, has would be nothing short of sheer folly, and you certainly wouldn't need to be Inspector Morse or Jessica Fletcher to figure out that the vast majority of the ineptitude which has been prevailing over the club in recent years comes from the invasively parasitic influence of both the Glazer family and in particular Ed Woodward in the boardroom, because I mean, as regards their on-field situation, I mean, the problem areas as regards the team, if there is obvious to a one-eyed disabled journalist, as there should be to those in control of the club, it is actually baffling to think that they've not even seemingly made an attempt to rectify the situation now. And what I mean by that in particular, like I would have always said in the last decade or so, that the central midfield in particular was obviously kind of porous, or at the very least harbouring deficiencies compared to the all-domineering artillery tank we were used to it being in the past, when it was populated by the likes of Brian Robson, Paul Ince, Roy Keane, Paul Scholes. Now, I've no doubt that bringing Paul Pogba back to the club was the original suggested antidote to that problem, but with the greatest of respect to the Frenchman, his performances for United have been more in and out than some of those in the driving school in the Police Academy movie years ago. But I would have thought and hoped, and may yet turn out to be the case, that the addition halfway through last season of Bruno Fernandes in particular has gone some way to sorting out the malaise in that part of the pitch in particular. But there are other areas which frankly at least appear not to have been dealt with, or in one case absolutely haven't been dealt with. Now, to go to the centre of the defence first, again, now this is just the journalist stroke fan in me being a little bit sentimentalist and looking at things with rose tinted glasses, as they say. But when you think back to a time when United had centre halves like Steve Bruce and Gary Pallister and John O'Shea, Ronnie Johnson, Rio Ferdinand, even the two Nevilles would have played centre halves at different times. Jaap Stam, Laurent Blanc, all big, imposing figures, physically and every other way. And I'm sure the hope and expectation would have been that Harry Maguire would have moulded into a similar sort of presence in the team, but sadly so far that has not manifested itself so far, because even without delving into what the former Leicester man has gone through off the field, his performances on the pitch have been hit and miss at best. But having said all of the above, if United were to sort out what I believe to be the major problem within the club, i.e. the Glazers and Ed Woodward in particular, I don't believe that removing Solskjaer from his position will do any good. But as regards, if Harry Maguire could sort of find some level of consistency and start looking like the centre half he looked when he was playing with Leicester, it would be a major step, I think, to at least putting United back in the direction they, at the very least, they want to be going. But as of now, I think even if Maguire did return to form, the biggest problem from a United perspective at the moment, in the opinion of this observer anyway, is between the post, because David De Gea is absolutely not the goalkeeper he was a couple of years ago. And I mean, to be fair, he's not that old by footballer terms, but whatever has happened to Spaniard, he's but a pale shadow of someone who genuinely was the best goalkeeper in the world for a long time, but it's only looking like a fraction of that at the moment. Now, I will be honest, even though they have recalled Dean Henderson back in off loan, and as of now, De Gea is, well, as of last week, it'll be interesting to see now tomorrow when they play. But as of last week, with De Gea still being first choice and Henderson seemingly the anointed backup, it does present the question as to why Romero is so far out of the picture, and whether the Argentine has a future at the club at all. Now, I would feel if they let him go that it would be a terrible unfairness to the player himself, because to my mind anyway, he has acquitted himself with a large degree of aplomb any time he's been put in, and I think were he to be allowed leave, or even if he wanted to leave, I think not only would that be a very unfair reflection of his ability as a keeper and his contribution to the club while he's been there, I think it would be a damning indictment of the club's treatment of the player, number one, and it would be a very damaging move from the point of view of the prospects of the team. Now, I know, depending on what way things proceed in the weeks and I suppose months ahead, if the ball doesn't break in a certain direction, I've no doubt there will be a clamour for Solskjaer to get the bullet, but I personally do not think that's the answer, and I would be just very interested to see how things pan out. Now, somewhere where it would also be very interesting to see where how things pan out is around the scene of Leinster rugby. Now, what Leinster rugby have achieved in the last nearly heading into the second decade now, has been absolutely phenomenal. When one thinks of the knocking on the door they had to do before they got their breakthrough, I suppose you would say, and the alacrity with which they've mopped up titles since making that breakthrough has been utterly phenomenal. But you would have to wonder, to some extent anyway, has time at least begun to catch up with them a little bit, when one considers the way they were so ruthlessly and obviously dismantled by Saracens in the European Cup. or as it will be forever to me, the Heineken Cup quarterfinals last weekend. Granted, Leinster, to their immense credit, did stage a spirited and commendable fight back after being trailing by 22 points to 3 at one stage, but in that instance it was very much a case of trying to bolt the stable door when the horse had long gone. But I have never seen a Leinster team dominated and dismantled as convincingly in both the line out in what now I would admit to being I'm no Donal Lennon or Jim Glennon or the boys when it comes to analysing rugby, but I would have a fair idea that the line out, the breakdown, and the actual set scrum are the three basic tenets of what a team must try to dominate if they're to have any hope of winning a game. And I have never, in all the years I've been properly tuned into rugby, I have never seen a Leinster team get dismantled to such an extent in those three areas as what happened last weekend against Saracens. Now, whether Saracens should be in the competition at all, having been relegated in their own domestic competitions for financial irregularities being exposed, is another thing, but that's a story for another day. But what would have to be said, in fairness to them, that shorn of the services of Owen Farrell on the day, now to my mind, outside of Bowden Barrett of the All Blacks when he's deployed at 10, Owen Farrell at this stage would nearly have to be regarded as the best fly half outside of Barrett in the world. So to think that they were missing his influence and were still able to dominate Leinster to the degree which they did is to the utmost credit of the English side. But I suppose to a certain extent, to look at it from the opposite sort of lens, such a defeat like that must, at this stage, I suppose, partially at least present questions for those in the Leinster setup. Now, before anyone says anything, I am not talking in terms of Leo Cullen stepping down or anything like that, even though I'd say the discussion will probably be had at some point, as it has to be said. It should also be occurring down in Munster with Johan van Graan, because to my mind, of the four provinces at the moment, I would have to say that, to me at least, and again I must stress this is only my opinion, but to me at least, Ulster presently would be the only ones of the four provinces that I would consider to be on the front foot, because Dan McFarland seems to have done great work up there, and with the likes of John Cooney at scrum half and Ian Henderson obviously, and then you've the couple of lads who were up from Leinster, Marty Moore, and I can't remember. There are others, I'm sure. But when you see the job Dan McFarland has done up there, and see the likes of Stuart McCluskey and John Cooney and people like that, and look at the rugby they played this season, it tells you that they have plenty to look forward to. I think the Munster, the inefficiencies in the Munster setup have been fairly well exposed at this stage, in the half back line in particular, but where that brings me is it brings me back to Leinster, and it is coming to the stage where one wonders how long more Johnny Sexton will soldier on for. Now he look, there's nobody can knock anything the man has done in his career, but one just wonders how long more his body can take it. Now the reassuring thing, I suppose, both from an Irish point of view and the Leinster point of view as well, is that the province in blue would appear to have a ready-made replacement who could very easily fill in both roles, in the guise of Ross Byrne. Now, any chance the young lad has got, he has grasped it with two hands, and look more than comfortable playing at the level in question, and it may not be too long until he's seen in the 10 shirt rather than the 21 shirt, on a more consistent and constant basis. But there again, I would imagine that you might see quite a degree of change in the Leinster lineup in the months and maybe years to come. I know the back row is obviously another hotbed of competition, because it as I mentioned there a couple of minutes ago about the scrum and the breakdown, it is really the engine room of a rugby team, and where Leinster once laden with world class players in that department, like Jamie Heaslip and Sean O'Brien and Josh van der Flyer now, and lads like that. One wonders, is it nearly heading towards a changing of the guard again? Because to me anyway, no, I could be wrong, but this is only my own observation, that Jack Conan is definitely not the same player he was since he sustained that injury that kept him out for a long time. And I'm just wondering, are you heading towards a situation whereby the Leinster back row in the not too distant future will look something like Dan Levy, Max Deegan and Caelan Doris. Now, yes, mother. One area where there absolutely will be change in the Leinster lineup will be at fullback, where in the last week or so, Rob Kearney has called time on what was a truly illustrious and honour-laden career, which saw him, by the time he had finished up, becoming the most decorated Irish rugby player in history, when one considers some of the greats alongside whom rather Kearney would have soldiered for a long time. You're talking in terms of John Hayes, Paul O'Connell, Brian O'Driscoll, Jamie Heaslip. Look, there were any number of players one could add into that list. Anthony Foley, God be good to him, Sean O'Brien. When you look at some of the decorated and most more decorated players there have been in Irish rugby, even in recent years, to think that Kearney outflanked them all in terms of honours won gives you some indication of the magnitude of the career the loud man enjoyed, both in the blue of Leinster and in the green of Ireland. Certainly for playing at fullback, it could of course be said that Kearney had the ideal backstory, if you want to call it that, by way of being a former Gaelic footballer. Indeed, I have very vivid memories of being in Navan with Brendan McNamee, my good and long-standing friend from the county of Louth. On a night Kearney played full forward on a Louth minor team, which I think Brendan's brother Thomas was actually managing. I know Dublin beat them on the night in question, but given the resources and that are pumped into Dublin football, there would be no shame in any team losing to them, even at that time. Now it's become completely galactic even in more recent years compared to that, but even back then, losing to Dublin, especially for what is, we must remember, the smallest county in the country, was certainly no reflection on them. But my point in mentioning that particular occasion was that even though Louth were well beaten. Carney stood out like a lighthouse, playing it full forward for the team in red and white, and I'm sure now in Meath we've had a few of these situations as well, but I'm sure the loud people must often wonder what might have been from a Gaelic football perspective when they see the career that Rob Kearney and indeed his brother Dave, that both of them have gone on to carve out in the oval ball spear, but of course more immediately, from a practical point of view now, it actually leaves the conundrum as to what the plan will be for going forward. That Kearney is officially now out of the equation, both for playing at fullback, both in terms of Leinster and the national team. Now, Jordan Larmour has been known to fill in at fullback on the Leinster team, certainly, and presumably would be in the running to do likewise with Ireland, but I would be of the opinion that for a couple of reasons. Number one, I don't think Larmour is big enough or imposing enough to be the last line of defence on any team, but besides that, I would feel that his talents are more or less wasted in the back three, that further out, well, at 15 anyway, that further out the field he could most certainly have the possibility of being more impactful, say playing either in one of the centre positions or even out on the wing. So it'll be very interesting to see, both in terms of Leinster and Ireland, as to what develops vis-a-vis Kearney's long-term replacement going forward. Just having covered what we have so far, and I know I'm rambling on even longer than last week, but I hope I'm making it entertaining for you all. I'm trying at the very least, and I will be the first to admit that I haven't got the full nuances of it yet, but I would hope as the weeks go on that I might get a little bit better at it and maybe even be able to tighten it up. But the one thing I would say is that it's better to have loads of sport to talk about than to be looking for something to do and something to talk about. And in a national sense, definitely one of the major talking points in the last week would have to be the wonderful achievement by Sam Bennett in winning the last stage of the Tour de France last Sunday, and thus claiming for himself the green jersey that goes along with the achievement of doing the said feat. And me being me that loves a good sporting crossover, I just thought it was a nice little anecdote to see Bennett triumphing up the Champs-Elysees last Sunday, when the previous weekend Johnny Murta gained his first Group 1 winner as a trainer in the Matron Stakes with a horse which was named after the aforementioned Parisian landmark. So my first memories of cycling would revolve around Jimmy McGee on commentary, and of course Jimmy, Lord of Mercy, and himself and Micheál Murray shared a great and somewhat unique gift of being able to make two flies travelling up a wall seem interesting and exciting. But as regards cycling, my earliest memories would be of Jimmy describing Stephen Roach's annexation of the Tour de France in 1987. I have a memory of Charlie High being in Paris to greet Roach on the day. Now, rumours that Charlie was actually there to buy shirts and just took in the cycling along the way cannot be substantiated for their veracity, but what I can also recall is that Roach was actually the poster boy of Calvita cheese, I think, for a good while. After that, I think his picture was on the Calvita box for a while after that. Not that I would be a lover of the bloody stuff. I cannot stomach cheese, I have to say, but on a couple of levels, well, that obviously sticks in my mind, Roach being on the box, and putting my farming hat on. I know how much cheese production and the like contributes to the maintenance of dairy farms and indeed the wider dairy industry. So I'm not going to let my distaste for the thing detract from the product. But looking back on it now, of course, that was something of a golden era for cycling in Ireland, simply because at the time, as well as Roach, you had Sean Kelly, who to my mind sits head and shoulders above any of the rest of them. But you had Kelly and Roach and Martin Early and Paul Kimmage, who has gone on to be a very, very fine writer in the years that followed. I may not always agree with what he writes, but I could never knock his alacrity as a writer. I do think that his ghostwriting, if you want to call it that, of the former rugby player Matt Hampson's autobiography was one of the best pieces of writing I've ever ingested. But you had, to get back on point, you had, as I say, Martin Early rather, and Sean Kelly, Stephen Roach, Paul Kimmage, and if I'm not mistaken, his brother Kevin Kimmage, I think, all of whom left Irish cycling in that at that time in a very healthy position. Now, as most people would know, because it's been splashed all over the world for long enough at this stage, that in more recent I was going to say years, but in the last couple of decades, cycling has been sort of dragged through the mud due to the miscreant behaviour of a few individuals, and maybe, to be more precise, one in particular, a certain Mr. Armstrong, and I don't think anyone needs me to harrow up that old ground all over again, because I certainly don't want to annoy myself by doing it, but there's no doubt that the reputation of the sport has taken a major hit because of Armstrong's nefarious behaviour, which did what one might consider to be irreparable damage to the sport. But having somebody like Sam Bennett come along, even only from an Irish perspective, will leave things in a better light, if you want to call it that. And you think back to when Main football was at its peak, from 1986 to 1991, which I would always regard as the greatest period we have ever had in our Gaelic football history. The deeds of them men would have inspired generations of the kids that came behind them to want to play for Meath. And as regards cycling, you can nearly be fairly sure that Sam Bennett's victory in Paris last week will have hopefully a similarly bountiful effect on the peloton in this country, because one bad apple shouldn't be allowed to corrode a whole barrel, I suppose, would be what you'd say. Now, admittedly, back in the years, Armstrong was by no means on his own in the dodgy goings on, but he was most certainly the ringleader of it. But one would hope that the sport may be able to recover its reputation to some degree, and with the like of Bennett on the go and making a name for himself, it certainly will do so from an Irish perspective. Of course, personally speaking, my own I won't say involvement with my own association with cycling came about very tragically and poignantly indeed, because after the late great Paul Dan Healion, who had been an exceptional GA player, both hurler and footballer, before following what turned out to be his true calling on the bike, and had an absolutely exceptional career in the saddle. It was only going to get considerably better, I would have said, but unfortunately Paul was tragically killed in a car accident. Oh God, many years ago, but now it's heading for 10, if not over it. And following Paul Dan's death, actually, I believe it was on the day he was laid to rest that Cathal Walsh, a local Garda here in Dunboyne, set about setting up the Inspiration Cycling Club here in the village, and I know there were others involved in it at the time, like Richie O'Malley, another guard, and Ray Mitchell, and Tosh Labrie, whose son Philip has cycled to a fairly high level as well. But in the year they were founded, I think, or possibly the second year, I know they invited me to their dinner dance, a function I was very proud and honoured to be asked to never mind attend, because the guest of honour on the night was none other than the great Jimmy McGee. Now, I had known Jimmy, I'd met him on a few occasions over the years at various different things, and to get to spend another night in Jimmy's company was never a bad thing. And also there on the night we had Sean Boylan, we had Stephen Roach. Any of you that have been following my writings for long enough will surely have come across the photograph of myself and my namesake along with Jimmy and Stephen Roach and former local county councillor, the great Noel Leonard, which was taken at that function. So I've always sort of kept an eye on matters of the peloton since that, although maybe not as close as I would have liked it, to be honest with you. However, it just struck me last Sunday when hearing about Sam Bennett, you're saying to yourself, hopefully another bunch of future stars will be caught up in the story of his success and possibly go on to enjoy their own careers on the bike. But anyway, I think we can safely say I've rambled on for more than enough this week. I do wholeheartedly apologise if I've waffled on too much and bored you all to sleep. That most certainly would not be the intention. I hope it was enjoyable and informative and not a complete bore and waste of your time, because I've absolutely loved putting it together. After all, there is nothing I love more in this world than talking about sport or writing about it. Possibly followed a very close second by farming, but we'll get back to that someday as well. So if it hasn't bored you to death, I look forward to seeing you for next week's episode. Just very, very, very finally, bit of a self-plug here. My second book, Rolling Down Memory Lane, is now available to download off the website boylantalksport.com. So I would be very grateful if you could tip over there and have a look. It only costs a fiver, and you can pay by either PayPal or any of the usual cards. You know yourself. Please give it a look. It would mean an awful lot to me on more levels than just the mere fact of selling a book. So I look forward to seeing you all for next week's edition, and keep safe, keep well, and we'll chat again soon.